So when I started my consulting business in 2006, I ran into the same problem that perhaps faced many of you guys at the outset of your businesses. I was going to be a marketing strategy consultant, and I was so proud. You get out there, you hang the proverbial shingle, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, everyone else is a marketing consultant too. And it's horrifying because the first mission, the first mandate is that you have to somehow distinguish yourself in the marketplace. You have to differentiate yourself, or else you're always a commodity. You're always competing on price. And as Alan says, and this is very much the ethos that he and the community espouse, that's the last place you want to be. You have to be able to position yourself successfully as a premium offering. You have to make it so that people are seeking you out specifically. That is the path to success. But of course, the question, as things get more and more crowded, as things get noisier and noisier, as there are more and more channels for people to be communicating and reaching others, how do you do that? In a world of options, where do you get the biggest ROI? How can you determine your own positioning and convey that to other people? And how can you actually break through so that you are heard? That was the problem that I set out to try to solve for myself so that I could have a successful business. And I set myself the challenge of trying to figure it out. And over the course of the intervening decade plus, I've managed to find a way to do that and build a strong and robust business. But part of the way that I did it, even before I launched my own business, I had started my career as a journalist, actually, here in Boston. And so I had a little bit of a journalist's mentality about how I would solve this problem. I thought, this is not insoluble. This is a complicated problem. I don't necessarily know the answers to it yet, but answers are out there because other people have solved them before I have. And so I decided I would start interviewing people to figure out what their solutions were. And so over the course of the past 6 or 7 years, I've written 3 books. The first one, Reinventing You, was about professional reinvention and career change. And it was sort of sparked by some of the career changes that I've had. But in it, I interviewed, multiple dozens of successful professionals who had changed the arc of their career life so that I could try to essentially reverse engineer what was the process, what enabled them to do that successfully and effectively, and basically try to create a roadmap so that the journey would be easier for other people down the line. And so I did that with my next book, Stand Out. That's basically a book about how to become a recognized expert in your field. And so I reached out and interviewed a lot of people that, those of you who are here in the business world are probably familiar with. Tom Peters and Dan Pink and Seth Godin and Robert Cialdini. I interviewed Alan and talked about the path that they took to developing breakthrough ideas and then building a following around them, getting those ideas heard. What did that look like? Is there a way to find a formula? I mean, of course, none of these things are one size fits all, but there are clear patterns, there are clear pathways, and I wanted to try to elucidate them. But it was in the course of researching and going out and speaking and touring about my book, Stand Out, that I realized something else quite powerful. As I was talking about, how do you build your brand as a recognized expert? Of course, I believe strongly that is important, indeed essential in today's marketplace. You have to have that. You have to have a strong brand and positioning. And yet, I came to realize that's not sufficient because a lot of people, even those who are very well respected, fall into 2 categories. One is that they might be well known. People might love them. People might think they do great stuff. And yet, they're scraping by. It's smoke and mirrors because they don't know how to monetize. They don't really know how to make a living. You look at all these YouTube stars that get swarmed on the streets by teenagers. YouTube hits the CPM rate for advertising. It's paltry. It's almost nothing. They are scraping by. There's a famous article that was actually written about a YouTube star that actually secretly worked as a barista because there's no other way to pay the bills. So you have, the professional equivalent of that. But then on the other hand, you have people who indeed, and many of you perhaps fall into this category, people who are very successful, they earn a good living, a great living in some cases, but yet the way that they're doing it is that they are working themselves to death. They are constantly in this swirl of delivery and marketing and delivery and marketing and delivery and delivery and delivery, and it's hard to escape that. And as Alan was alluding to earlier today, if we are going to build not just the careers that we want, but the lives that we want, we have to somehow find a better way of doing things. And so that led me on the quest that brought me to my most recent book, which came out in October, called Entrepreneurial You. And Entrepreneurial You is a book, essentially, about how to make money as a coach or as a consultant. It's a book about how to create multiple income streams in your business so that you can be creating a flywheel of business, drawing in more to you and raising your overall revenue. And to do that, I interviewed about 50 high 6 and 7 and even 8-figure entrepreneurs in depth about their business models. That was the part that, in looking at sort of the canon of business literature, I hadn't heard before, I hadn't found. What I really wanted to be able to do was to ask people exceedingly nosy questions about how precisely they made money. And so this was my opportunity. So I interviewed them and really tried to break it down into different categories, and so that people could look at it as almost a smorgasbord, right? Because no one can do everything. We shouldn't even try. But for all of us, I am willing to bet that in addition to the coaching or consulting that is the mainstay of your business, as it is for mine, there are probably other areas, untapped areas, that you could be exploring that could add more overall revenue to your bottom line. In the course of researching Entrepreneurial You, in a lot of ways, this was my secret mission for myself. I was looking around at friends and colleagues, and I would hear sometimes, especially about online courses, which is an area that I'll talk about momentarily. But I would hear about not just like mythical things, not just like, oh, it's the guy on the internet with a Lamborghini, but I would actually hear about friends of mine, people I knew, and they would have like, oh, it's the $3 million launch for their course. And I thought, how are they doing that? What am I missing here? And so I wanted to learn. And so I wrote Entrepreneurial You so that I would have an opportunity, first of all, to interview these people, learn about what they were doing, and second of all, so that I could apply it in my own business. This was in a lot of ways a self-help project for me. I was already making a very good living, but I wanted to up the bar even more. And so strictly using the information that I learned as a result of researching and writing this book, strictly from all of the things that I learned in writing Entrepreneurial You and applying in my business over the course of 2016, which is the year that I was writing it, I was able to increase my overall annual income by $193,000. And so my hope for you guys, and for the reason I wrote the book, is to be able to share more of these strategies to provide a little bit more tactical advice, as well as, we have the big picture, we have the strategy, but also there's a lot of questions about, what are people doing? How do you do it? And I wanted to be able to provide ideas about how to do that, because it bothers me to no end in our world today that so often it's the loudest voice that wins. In a noisy environment, it's usually the loudest voice that drowns everyone out. What I would like to see instead is a world where the best ideas win. And so if we are able to empower the people who have the best ideas, the coaches, the consultants, the entrepreneurs, the authors, who are genuinely talented, who genuinely have something to contribute, and can give them just a little bit more information about how they can build a robust business financially with multiple streams of income, to me, that is a way of raising the overall discourse. That is a way of making a positive difference. So I wanted to spend today sharing with you some of these strategies that I learned, and we're going to have time, of course, for questions at the end, but it's my hope that some of these can be as helpful to you as they have been to me in the course of my business over the past couple of years. So the first step, the first piece that's important to say, is that when it comes to developing multiple income streams and sort of building out your business in that direction, I think where sometimes people go wrong, in the discourse of how it's talked about, is that there's an assumption that you can immediately jump in to new streams of money making. And I mean, yes, some people do it. Oh, you just, put a bunch of money into Facebook ads and you can gin up almost anything. But the truth is, these are not long-lasting successes, and it's not the kind of business that I believe that most of you want to build. Most of you guys here in this room are established, credentialed professionals. You are people that have spent decades building up your professional reputation. This is not about a quick hit. This is about finding a way for you to build a sustainable business over the long term. So how do we do that? How do we build trust first and then leverage that into income? What I discovered throughout the course of writing my book Standout and then later developing the online course that I was alluding to, my flagship course, Recognized Equity, is that fundamentally, if you want to become recognized for your expertise, there are 3 key elements. It's content creation, social proof, and your network. This is something I've written about for Harvard Business Review as well. And why these 3? Why do they fit together? Well, it turns out that foundationally, these really are the most essential for this reason. Number 1, content creation. It may actually seem, silly, like, oh, content creation, why should I bother doing that? Oh, everybody's doing content creation. Won't that just get lost in the noise? Blah, blah. No. I believe it is truly critical for this reason. If you do not share your ideas publicly, no one will know what your ideas are. It sounds pretty basic, but the truth is, if we want to be thought leaders, if we want to be known and recognized by people beyond just the sphere of folks who have worked with us directly, if we want to go beyond referral-based businesses to a kind of business where newcomers can be drawn to us, we have to be sharing our ideas publicly so that people can find us. Think of your content as the beacon that is calling people, like-minded people, to you. That is an essential thing. And the truth is, unfortunately, right, it's not one article that's going to do it. It's not 10 articles that's going to do it. It's 100 articles that's going to do it. It's 500 articles that's going to do it. Now, that is painful, but it also can be empowering if you look at it in a different way. Because if you are persistent, if you are willing to put in that level of content creation, and I'm speaking about it as writing because that's sort of the base of what I do, but it could be other things. It could be podcasts or videos or whatnot. If you're willing to do that, it builds a competitive moat because the vast majority of other people are not willing to put in that effort. I started blogging for the Harvard Business Review in 2010, so it's been close to 8 years now. I have done close to 200 articles for them. I've done about 250 articles for Forbes over the course of about 3.5 years that I wrote for them. So, by now it's 500 plus articles. It was not until I had done probably about between 200 and 300 articles that I began getting regular, unsolicited inquiries for my business. Now, there's a lot of value before that, right? If you have pre-existing clients, people that you want to, nudge from a prospect into a sale, content can help. It can absolutely help with your credibility. But in terms of the holy grail of unsolicited business, it takes, let's be honest, a number of years. But when you do that, it builds a competitive advantage in the marketplace that is extremely hard to dislodge. Number 2, social proof. This is a term borrowed from psychology, popularized by Robert Cialdini. Many of you guys may have read his book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. Some of you might have met him down in Palm Beach with Alan. But Robert Cialdini talks about social proof. Essentially, this is a form of credibility, right? In a noisy and crowded world, why you? Why should someone bother to listen to you? That's the trick, right? And so if we can give people a shortcut to follow, if we can give them a heuristic so that they are able to say, oh, okay, he seems credible, she seems credible, I'll give it a listen. That makes our case that much easier. The fastest way that you can do that is to align your brand with other well-known brands that are already known and liked and respected and trusted by that person. It could be that you blog for a mainstream publication that people have heard of, like the early work that I did with Harvard Business Review or with Forbes. It could be that, let's say you write a book and you get it blurbed by other authors that people like. That's a form of social proof. It could be that you are the head of a professional association. It could be that you have worked with blue chip clients that people respect. Oh, well, if she's good enough to consult for Apple, then she's good enough for me. But social proof is the second component. And the third component is your network. And your network matters for a lot of different reasons, but one of the biggest ones is that they are your earliest ambassadors and evangelists. If you have great content and you even have great social proof, that's wonderful. But if it's not amplified, if it's not actually reaching a larger group beyond the people that you just happen to know in your town or in your company, it's not going to go very far. You have to have that amplification. And so spending time building and cultivating your network of peers and colleagues and people around you is extraordinarily valuable. These, of course, are also the people that can help hone your ideas and make them sharper and better. And it becomes a form of social proof because you are known by the company that you keep. So with all of this, if you have these three pieces together, it becomes a very powerful formula for becoming a recognized expert and having the trust in place so that people are willing to buy things from you, to give you money, to do business with you. So that's the foundation. But then is the question, how do you grow that? How do you begin to leverage that and turn that into revenue? And so there's a few categories of things, and I write about this in my book, Entrepreneurial You, where I consider it kind of a two birds, one stone category, right? These are channels, these are ways of meeting new people and introducing yourself to new audiences. So they have a marketing benefit, but they also, if you do it right, have a financial benefit. So this is a gentleman named Pat Flynn. Some of you guys may have heard of him. He's a well-known blogger and podcaster. He has his podcast called Smart Passive Income. And he's somebody that I feature in Entrepreneurial You. The way that Pat got his start, it was 2007, 2008. He was a young, aspiring architect. And he decided that he was going to get certified for green building practices. You may have heard of LEED certification for green building. If you are a practitioner and you pass this test, it enables you to work in green buildings, and that was something he really cared about and wanted to do. But it's not an easy exam. So he started studying for it, and he figured that probably the best way that he could really learn it and reinforce that was by essentially starting a blog about his process. So he's studying for the exam, he's blogging and sharing his ideas and tips and things that he learns, and eventually he takes the test and he passes. Fantastic. But he realized over the course of the months that he'd been studying for it and creating this blog, he had actually started to get a lot of traffic. There were a lot of other people that wanted to pass the LEED certification exam as well. So it occurred to him one day after he passed this exam, people could read all the different blog posts, but I bet that there's probably some people that would like it if everything was in a book. They might even be willing to pay a little bit of money for that book, even though they could read it for free if they clicked 100 times. So just for kicks, he put it together. He created a little book for his PDF, and he put it up for sale online. The next month, he had sold $7,900 worth of these ebooks. This was all material that was available for free. He had done it as a sideline, just as a little project for himself. He made $7,900 in the sales of his ebooks. Now, in the scheme of things, this is not going to make you rich on your own, but it became extremely powerful for him because by then it was 2008, and a month after he launched the ebook, he got laid off from his job. And it turned out, of course, no other architecture firms were hiring. Things were at a standstill because of the recession. He was not going to be an architect anytime soon. And so he saw that there was traction with his ebooks and with online marketing. And he thought, you know what? Maybe I'll give this a go. So that is how he came to launch the Smart Passive Income blog and podcast. But it started with ebooks. And so something like that, perhaps some of you guys have heard of people like Hugh Howey or the gentleman who does habit stacking. Those folks have been able to build businesses that bring in $50,000 plus per month through the sale of ebooks. And they form simultaneously a way of marketing yourself to new audiences for relatively low dollar amounts and a source of income. So if you like writing, it's one of the things to possibly consider. Now, another pathway that I explored in Entrepreneurial You, and again, this is not to say that everyone should do everything. Absolutely not. But some of these things might speak to you. Another pathway is podcasting. So this is another person that I profiled. His name is Jordan Harbinger. And Jordan had a show called The Art of Charm, which he actually had been doing for over a decade. He was one of the longest lasting continuous podcasters. Now, the caveat to this is that Jordan recently had a breakup with his business partners, so he's gone out and launched his own show. But one of the things that I think is most interesting about the work that he did over time, at first, it started out as a hobby. He wasn't really taking it that seriously. He was doing episodes sporadically. But about 6 years into it, he realized that if he could do it on a consistent basis, he was able to dramatically increase the subscription rate and build a following. And over the course of time, Jordan was able, amidst a listing of huge corporate behemoths, what are the top podcasts? It's the NPR podcasts, it's the Disney, it's the ESPN podcasts, and Jordan. He was able to build that up from scratch as an individual through his consistent application. And one of the stats that I quote in Entrepreneurial You that I think is actually one of the most significant that I've heard probably about life in general. This is a statistic about podcasts, but I believe fervently that it is true about life in general. There was a study that was done by a guy named Josh Marshall, and it was about podcast longevity. Josh Morgan, about podcast longevity. And he tracked longitudinally podcasts between June 2005 and June 2015. What he discovered, first of all, there are a lot of podcasts. Even then, there were 300,000 plus podcasts. I mean, it might seem suicidal to get into that. Why would you do that? There's so many. The competition is obviously insurmountable, right? And yet, what he discovered over that period of time, that 10-year study, the average podcast lasted only 6 months and 12 episodes before its creator gave up and shut it down. We think that we are competing against hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people, when in actuality, if we persist, the numbers dwindle. We are competing against maybe hundreds. If we push forward, we actually have a dramatically increased chance of success. Jordan, at the height of his Art of Charm infrastructure, was at about 3 million downloads per month, and he had built a multi-7-figure business for his podcast, not just through sponsorship, which was one pathway, one direct pathway, but also he had an interesting business where The Art of Charm was a show that was about success in business and life, how to have more charisma, that kind of thing. And so he would have in-person trainings, in-person boot camps that people would pay between $6,000 and $8,000 to attend. They would fly to Los Angeles to do it. He would promote that during the commercial breaks on his podcast. And the podcast served as an advertising driver for that, bringing in millions of dollars. That was one route that he was able to do. And I will note simultaneously, these podcast episodes were all interviews, right? So he was able to network, to build his network and build connections while building his audience and advertising his business, driving revenues. That is the definition of killing two birds with one stone. Another person that I profiled in entrepreneurial you, it's actually a couple, Bjork and Lindsay Ostrom. This is Bjork here. They live in Minnesota. That's the Bjork. And they have a food blog called Pinch of Yum. And Pinch of Yum has been able to become an incredibly successful blog. Right now, it's bringing in, depending on the month, somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 per month. Now, there's a few key things that we need to know about how do you make money from blogs, right? The first thing is that for the first 2 years of the blog's existence, it didn't earn any money at all. It's kind of the nature of blogs, right? You're building a following, you're finding a voice. There was nothing. But over time, they were able, through posting recipes regularly and fostering interactivity with people visiting and commenting, they were able to generate a lot of so-called Google juice. Their search engine optimization was very good, very high. And so there was a lot of traffic that came. And so when we say making money from a blog, you might think that it's actually making money from one thing. It's not. It's making money in a variety of different ways, everything from display advertising on the site to sponsored posts. So for instance, a flour company might pay them money to create a unique recipe that would then be sponsored by that flour company. I love some of the creative ways that they made money. Additionally, they have a membership site for other food bloggers. It's called Food Blogger Pro. And these aspiring food bloggers pay them a monthly subscription fee, and they run a community to try to train them in best practices in food blogging. Yet another source. They have live workshops for their fans where people fly in from around the world to do cooking demonstrations and learn from Bjork and Lindsay. Lindsay is also a talented food photographer, which is a skill that it's good to have if you're a food blogger. And she created a book on food photography, which they sell exclusively on their website. They made, at the time of publishing the book, $220,000 from this book. Now, for those of you who have written books, and I know a number of you in the audience have, that is a heck of a lot more than almost any advance that you're going to get these days. To make $220,000 from your book that you sell direct on your website. And that's not even all. They have affiliate income through Amazon, because if they have a post, for instance, they say, oh, here's how to cook the best crock pot dishes. Well, obviously, if you want to do that, you probably need a crock pot, right? So they have an affiliate link. If you buy the crock pot through their Amazon link, they will get a 6 to 8% return off of it. So thinking broadly, the blog, on one hand, is a promotional effort. And for the first couple of years of their business, that's all it was. It was all promotion. It was all marketing. But then there's a tipping point, and you begin to be able to leverage serious money from it. Now, of course, there's speaking. And I know this is an area of interest to many of you guys. You may have done speaking with Alan. You may be involved in NSA or other things like this. Speaking can, in many ways, be especially in the early days, a form of promotion, because you're probably starting out speaking for free. You may even continue to speak for free depending on the audience, if it's a group of buyers or potential buyers that you think could be valuable for you. But if you want to flip the switch and monetize and turn it into a source of paid income, there's also a real process for that. But one of the people that I feature in the book is a guy named Todd Herman. And part of the reason that I included him in the book and was so struck by his story, first of all, he set a real deadline for himself. He was launching a business. He was a guy in Western Canada who was a youth sports mindset coach. So he would coach young athletes on having the proper mindset. So he decided that he was a good speaker. He wanted to try to learn how he could meet more clients, get out there, and he said, all right, I'm going to just go out and speak for everybody. But he was clever about it. He went out to all of the youth coaches in the area, and he said, I will speak to your team for free, but there is one caveat. For every student, for every young athlete that's there, at least one parent has to be there. Because he knew, of course, that the parents were the buyers. So over a 90-day period, Todd drove all over Western Canada. He did more than 60 talks. And sure enough, it worked. He was able to begin getting coaching clients for his youth mindset work. But even more interesting, even more to the point, some of the adults in the audience started coming up to him and said, "Todd, this is good stuff. Do you do this for grown-ups too?" And of course, he had the right answer, which was, "Yes, absolutely," even though he had never done it for grown-ups. And so his first client was actually an official in the Canadian government who was there with his son playing sports and said, "Todd, we need this in the government." So they brought him and they hired him. One of his earliest second clients was the National Hockey League, because an executive was there supporting his child, who is a youth athlete, and decided that the professional athletes needed it as well. So if you keep your eyes open, if you look for opportunities by going out, by hustling with the speaking, you can often begin to generate real revenue opportunities. What I have come to believe when it comes to paid speaking opportunities, getting paid directly for it, and I'm glad, of course, to answer more questions about this, but one of the things that I've seen in my own business is that, frustratingly, much as I would like this to not be the case, it is almost impossible to get a paid speaking gig if you go directly to the organizers and try to pitch yourself. And part of this is because it's fundamentally about a power differential, right? These guys are gatekeepers, and they relish the opportunity to be the chooser. And the moment that you essentially become a supplicant, saying, "Hey, will you, can I speak for you, and will you pay me to do it?" It actually positions you negatively in their mind as someone who may in fact not be worthy of being paid to speak. And so instead, the two strategies that I have found that actually do work for speaking, and I travel around and speak a lot, anywhere from about 30 to 60 times a year, is number one, creating content that attracts people to you. If you can create content that is tied to the area you want to be speaking in so that your prospect will see it, then when they come to you, automatically the scales are tipped in your favor. You are able then to name your price far more successfully. And the second is the indirect route, where you don't go directly to the person booking the speakers, you go to someone around them, meaning perhaps a past speaker at an event they've had, or someone who is on the conference committee that you know, something like that. And you go to that person and you have them be your recommender, you have them be your intercessor. And with that, you're able to get a lot more credibility because, again, you're not coming to them yourself. So when you approach speaking that way, it can become a very lucrative source of income. Now, these are all relatively traditional ways. I mean, of course, blogging is relatively newfangled, but nonetheless, it's been around. It's been a thing for nearly 20 years. But one of the things that when I talk with folks who are interested in finding new ways to monetize, that people are really interested in is questions of scale and leverage. How can you begin to break into things that allow for more passive income or reaching people more at scale? And so I wanted to talk with you about some of those strategies as well. And again, for this talk, for the hour that we have together, I'm certainly not covering every strategy that I talk about in Entrepreneurial You around creating multiple income streams, but I did pick out some of the things that I thought might be particularly salient for you guys as experienced coaches and consultants. So a big one is online courses. I know that there's a lot of interest in this, and I was interested in it myself as essentially a counterweight to the speaking work that I do. I started to fantasize, really, about online courses. Because, when my book Standout came out in 2015, that year I gave 74 talks. So, one and a half-ish per week on average. I was on the road almost all the time. And by the end of it, I was just completely worn out. I decided I had to cut back because it was just too much. And I love speaking, but you hit a limit. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if there were a way that I could begin to have scalable income streams? And so I had started exploring online courses a little bit before. I had done a course with Creative Live in 2014. In 2015, I created a course with a company called Learningly that was partnering with The Economist. So I kind of muddled around with it a bit through other people, but I never created my own online course. So I began to try to learn about it and experiment with it. This is a gentleman named Danny Eny, who's one of the people that I profiled in Entrepreneurial You. And a big part of writing the book was that I wanted to reach out to him and people like him to learn exactly what they were doing. And so, very briefly, what I did learn from that, first of all, most importantly, what so often happens, not just for online courses, but for lots of products, and this is kind of the old school way, is that people go off, they create their thing that they think is going to be amazing and perfect, and they spend countless hours creating it and honing it, and then they put it out into the marketplace and they say, okay, it's ready, and then it's this horrible moment where you don't know if the market's going to love it or hate it or ignore it or what. And sometimes it works out, sometimes you guessed right, but the honest truth is a lot of times you guess wrong. And if that is the case, it can be devastating in terms of just the loss of time and energy, and it's just soul-sucking. That was actually what happened to Danny his first time around. He created a course, he spent countless hours, he said about 6 months of his life creating it, and one person bought it in the end. He didn't want that to happen again. And so he actually created a methodology which has become standard really now in terms of best practices of how online courses are done. It is what I followed to great effect. And it is essentially doing a pilot first. So in April of 2016, I sent an email to my email list. And I said, hey, special limited chance to work with me. And I sent out this notice saying, essentially, hi, I am thinking of doing an online course. I am going to run a special pilot for it to see if people are interested and to figure out what should be in the course. If it's a course on becoming a recognized expert, if you guys are interested in this, there are 40 slots that are going to be available, and it's going to be at a very discounted rate. The special slots are $500 a piece. The course is going to be quite a bit more than that. Sign up now, first 40 who are interested. We will do this special pilot run together where, it's a 5-week webinar series to test out the ideas and learn together, co-create it. And so the beautiful thing about a pilot like that, you're not getting out over your skis, right? If no one signs up, you can just say, okay, guess that wasn't a thing, and you move on to the next one. You haven't risked anything because you haven't created anything yet. Fortunately, it actually worked. I was teaching a class at Duke University's Fuqua School of Business, where I do adjunct teaching, and I had set the email to go out at about 11:15 in the morning. So I was going to be teaching while it was happening. So as soon as it was noon, as soon as it was time for the lunch break, I logged on just to see how things were going. And I was astonished because the course had sold out during that time. It had actually more than sold out, and so I had to shut it down really quickly so it wouldn't sell more spaces. But so in that 45-minute period, I was able to bring in $23,500 of people registering for the pilot. And so I had this initial validation, and it enabled me to be able to go forward with confidence, doing the pilot, learning what people were interested in, what questions they had, and then that fall, that September, I launched the full Recognized Expert course and was able to, to pull it together. I have now earned well over I think possibly well over $250,000 over the past couple of years from that course. And in addition to it, it has been amazing because it has enabled me for the first time to really bring a community of people together. The course creates the community. And from this, and this is something that Alan has remarked upon a number of times, when you have a group of people together, they are often very likely to raise their hands and say, hey, what if we had a workshop about this? What if we had this other thing? And then at that point, you can create that offering accordingly. Pardon me. So from the online course, it did not actually occur to me to have an in-person component, but the folks in the course asked for it. And so I started experimenting with live events. And so since then, I've done 1 days, I've done 2 days, I've actually created longer-term masterminds, and it's enabled me to create whole new income streams. So in fact, right now, I actually have 9 income streams in my business. And for those who might be curious, it is consulting, of course. It's executive coaching. And by executive coaching, I mean specifically, I work with folks, typically, coaches or consultants or authors, et cetera, who are working to become recognized experts. So we sort of do executive coaching around platform building. So that's a form of it. I write books. I do my business school teaching. I have speeches, of course, keynote speeches. I have affiliate income. I'm going to be explaining that next. Online courses, live events, and then now year-long masterminds. So those 9 different income streams, when you hear that, you might think, oh, but doesn't that pull you in a million directions? Isn't that complicated somehow to manage? But the truth is it's not. It's actually easier to manage. And some of you may recognize this from your own businesses, because when you have these multiple income streams, if they are aligned, you're actually creating a flywheel for your business where one thing is supporting the other. If somebody buys my book, that person is pretty likely that they might join my email list. And if they join my email list, they might buy an online course from me. And if they buy that online course, they might say, oh my gosh, I want to come to a live workshop. So they sign up for that. And on it goes. People can enter at different places, and it enables them to interact and interface in different ways. So now, what are a few other things before we switch into the Q&A? Affiliate marketing. Now, this is something, some of you guys may do this, some of you may not have ever heard of it. But it's an interesting thing to think about or to consider. Affiliate marketing is essentially primarily online marketing, primarily through emails, where you partner with a colleague that you like and respect and trust, and you agree to promote their material, and they will promote yours. Now, pretty simple. In some cases, you do this just, hey, I like you, I'll promote your stuff, and you do the same for me. So it can just be a kind of a favor trade. But in other cases, you actually have exact tracking. So if 7 of my audience members buy an online course, I would get a predetermined fee for each of them. And online courses especially are very scalable, so you can have pretty large profit margins. If it's a $2,000 course, it's highly common to have a 50% revenue split. So you could get, $1,000 for every person that signs up. This is actually a gentleman named Dove Gordon. He's been involved in Alan's community. He's somebody that I profile in Entrepreneurial U who runs a listserv focused on affiliate partnerships. And so this has been a great way to help build my business. Now the caveat, of course, is you have to partner with people you really respect, because you don't want to tarnish your name by affiliating with people that are crappy. But nonetheless, if you have people that really have a high standard that are able to help raise your brand too, like the rising tide lifts all boats, it can be a huge win-win by introducing each other to your respective audiences. And affiliate income over the past couple of years, I've really only been doing this at all since 2015 and sort of seriously since 2016. It's now a 6-figure income line for me. So it's something interesting to think about. And then lastly, there's masterminds. This is a woman I profile in Entrepreneurial U named Liz Scully, who has a business running masterminds and had a lot of interesting thoughts about it. But masterminds can take the form of a sort of 1 or 2 day sort of special retreat where it's like a one-time thing. I'm not sure where he is, but our friend Jim Carr is here in the room. He came to one that I did in December. There was a 2-day mastermind retreat, and it can also be a longer thing as well. And so Constance, who's here, is part of a year-long mastermind that I'm running as well. And so these are great ways for the people in your audience who are interested in connecting with high caliber, like-minded people. Once, lots of people want to offer masterminds, but if you have taken the prerequisite steps, if you have built the trust so that people have absolute confidence that within your market space and market sphere, that you are somebody that will convene the right people, that you have the ability to curate and the discretion to bring good people together, then they're very willing to do that. There's huge needs for high-level community. And so if you can provide that within your niche, that can also be a really wonderful both income stream and a way of just connecting and giving back in a way that's exciting for you. You always learn from it as well. And so the question for you guys as we're talking about all of these things is, for sure, don't think you have to do all of these things. I don't do all these things. Podcasts, for instance. I mean, I'm a believer in podcasts. I love podcasts. I listen to them all the time, but I don't have my own. I actually made a strategic decision in 2015 when Standout launched. I decided that what I needed to do was not necessarily go deeper in reaching people at that time. When I had a book to promote, I wanted to go wider. And so I said, I'm not going to have my own podcast, but I'm going to make it a point to be on as many podcasts as I possibly can around the book launch. So during the course of 2015, I was on 160 different podcasts promoting Standout. This was actually extremely powerful for me. It was the principal driver in being able to more than double the size of my email list, which is important to mention as one of the key elements here. As you're growing your community, as you're building things out, having an email list, having a way to connect with people directly, so you're not reliant on the goodwill of Facebook or Twitter or what have you, is extremely important. And so with these podcasts, I would promote a so-called lead magnet, some kind of a free giveaway that people could opt in for and join my list. And so I was able during that year, driven by the podcast, to grow my list from 10,000 at the start to 25,000 by the end of the year. So my email list now, it's just shy of 50,000. So it's really been able to grow, and it's my way of reaching people directly. But so all this is to say, you don't have to do all these things. But if you find an area that resonates with you, if you find something where you think it would be fun or interesting or a possible way that you could expand, it's often worth exploring. Over the course of time that I've built out these 9 income streams, this is not something that's happened overnight. This is something that I've tried to consciously cultivate in my business over the past 7 to 8 years. I'm a believer in only adding 1 to 2 new income streams a year. If you do more than that, oftentimes you're going to feel overwhelmed, you're going to fall behind. But if you can focus intently on just 1 or 2 per year, that can be a really great way of expanding your overall income base and, frankly, risk mitigation. We never know what market conditions are going to be. We never know if a certain thing that we do is going to go out of vogue for some reason that we can't predict or control. And so having different ways of reaching your customers or broadening out what you do through these different income streams can be extremely valuable. So with that, I'd love to actually open up the floor. We have a little time. If there are questions, we can do that. I know there are runners with microphones, and so there's people around. So why don't we actually go ahead and start in the back, and we can go for it. And I'll just mention before we start with the questions, this is exciting. This is new for me. If any of you guys are curious about this, I'm happy to tell you about the process. But I've always had these sort of downloadable things, but oh my gosh, I tested it out, so hopefully it works. But if you would like to get the Entrepreneurial You self-assessment, it's the free lead magnet that I mentioned. It's 88 questions to help you think about different income streams. You can text the phrase Dorie Clark to that number, and you'll get it. It's like magic. Who knew? I've never done it with a texting before, but I will mention it because it's kind of a cool thing to be able to do. So I will just let you know about that. So let's go for your question in the back.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dorie. That was amazing. Question for you on the online courses. Is that synchronous or asynchronous?
So I've done different models with the online courses. The initial pilot course that I did was all synchronous. Essentially, it was set up as 6 weekly webinars for people, weekly 90-minute webinars. And so everybody just joined on Zoom, and we did it all at the same time. When I launched the full course, I spent the summer creating a library of content. So it was, a million 5-minute videos. And so I had that as kind of the base of the materials, but we also had a schedule of live interactions that we would do, and it was also done as a cohort model because people were all joining at the same time based on a big push. I am working now to begin to transform into a so-called evergreen model where it's not so much a launch model of the courses, but nonetheless, because I I do think it's more motivating for people when there's a live component to it. One of the things that I've implemented and have kept, and it's actually just a bonus for people who have taken the course in the past, is that they have a lifetime membership in the Recognized Expert course along with monthly webinars. So it's monthly live webinars with either special guest stars or Q&A or whatever. By way of example, next Tuesday, I have one of the alumni from the course, who's this woman who's been very, very good at getting quoted in national press, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Forbes, Fortune, all of that. She's been very good, and so I'm going to be interviewing her, and she's going to share her methodology for that, and then we're both going to be taking questions during the webinar about the process. So that sort of thing. So mostly asynchronous, but with regular live monthly webinars. Thank you. So next question. Let's go to the gentleman in the back there. Is there a microphone right there? Thanks.
Am I the gentleman in the back?
Yeah,
It's
you
very
are.
generous.
Hi.
Thank you, Dorie. Very tactical question about the online course piece and the pilot email you sent out. So did you have the content developed beforehand, or did you just kind of say, it's going to be about this, here's the 4 or 5 key points, are you interested in signing up? I'm just trying to get a sense of the level of detail and thinking that went into that.
Great question, and yes, very little had been developed. Essentially what I had done was create basically a one-page sales page, and so I had identified the key modules that I wanted to cover. It sort of mapped to elements of my book Stand Out, so it was kind of like, okay, we're going to talk about networking, and we're going to talk about creating a breakthrough idea, but that was about it. And so what I did was, once the people had signed up, I then surveyed them relentlessly. And they kind of liked it because it was co-creation, right? So I surveyed them. I'm like, hey, what do you want to know about finding your breakthrough idea? So they would send me a bunch of questions, and then I would develop the webinar based entirely on the questions they had asked me. So I had not expended any effort before I knew that people were going to buy it. Does that answer it? Great, thank you. Other questions? All right, yes. Yeah, let's go for Rob. I guess he's got the microphone.
Question for you. So I wanted to talk about your lead magnets. I know in one of your books, I listened to an Audible, there were a lot of lead magnets throughout the book. So you just talked about the webinar stuff. So I wonder if you've had any success using Facebook ads and tracking pixels. And if you did you take them to your site where you had a lead magnet pop-up, or would you bring them directly to a landing page that would be focused specifically on a lead magnet and then bringing them into your funnel that way?
All right, thank you. So 2 answers for this. So the first one is that, full disclosure, I've done nothing with Facebook ads up to this point. All of the growth of my list has been organic, so meaning I have not paid for any ads or leads or things like that. The good news about that is that organically generated subscribers are usually the best ones. They're the ones that are very self-motivated, that have gone through and said, yes, I want to subscribe to this. However, you can certainly juice your numbers a lot through having online ads. This is something that is on my list to explore starting in the fall. I like to sort of pace myself with different projects. This is a fall 2018 project, so come back to me next year and I'll have much more to report about that. However, when it comes to organic traffic and lead magnets and things like that, so there's 2 things that I do. One is on my website, on my homepage, DorieClark.com, there's a tool that I use called Sumo. You guys can Google that. It is a free tool, although they have a paid upgrade if you wish. And it's really great. It allows you to easily create they call it a welcome mat. If you go to my website, you can see it, but it's basically caveat. If you go to my website on a desktop, you can see it because I don't actually have this operative on the mobile site because it just doesn't sort of look as right the way that my site is set up. But it's very handsome, and it's kind of a thing that comes up right when your website is loading that encourages people straight off the bat to download your lead magnet, your giveaway, so that you can get that email subscriber. So it's kind of a nice way to drive email subscribers much more frequently. There's also what I will call tasteful pop-ups. Pop-ups have a little bit of a bad reputation because the first generation of them were just like so tacky and awful and you couldn't get rid of them. But Sumo allows you to be pretty smart about it. For instance, they have what's called an exit intent pop-up. So it can actually kind of sense based on your mouse movement when somebody's going to leave your page. And so you can have a pop-up just come up when that happens. So it's like, hey, before you go, are you interested in, getting Dorie's download? And so it's much less offensive to people. So that's one way of doing it. And then I also use a tool called Lead Pages that enables you to have very handsome landing pages that you create. Those are ones that especially if you're trying to analyze where you're getting most of your leads from, it's nice because you can very easily track and create it. So for instance, if I want to see how many people are subscribing based on my Harvard Business Review articles, I can find that out because I have a special landing page in my HBR bio. It's dorieclark.com/HBR. And so I can tell that anyone who subscribes through that page is a Harvard Business Review reader. So I can actually track the efficacy of my marketing methods that way. So I hope that is helpful. So I see a question in the far back. Let's go right there.
Hello. First of all, thanks for speaking with us today. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've started to think about segmenting? Because when you're first putting out content, it makes sense. But then once you start getting to 25,000 or 50,000, average has no meaning, right? So how have you started to think about that as you've grown?
Yeah, thank you. Segmentation is really important. And so this is the place where the email service provider that you use, your email list provider, it becomes really important. Probably like everybody else, when I started my company in 2006, I used Constant Contact. They're here in Massachusetts, just to sort of blast out the email newsletter. Apologies to Constant Contact, but please don't use Constant Contact. The email newsletters, they look like email newsletters. Like people have become acclimated so that they see that and they're like, oh, can't be anything important in there. It's like the graphics and it's, guess where I've been speaking. Like a lot of the sort of classic email newsletters, very narcissistic and solipsistic and just not relevant to the reader. And it looks like an email newsletter. What I have started doing instead that I feel kind of passionate about. So, again, take everything with a grain of salt. But what I am doing is I actually use no formatting. No formatting whatsoever. If you're interested in seeing this, feel free to download this and you can get on my list to see it. But part of the reason that I do that, of course people understand intellectually that it is an email newsletter, but the feeling that they get is that it is a personal message from me because it does not have the bells and whistles. And it actually, I think, is received in a much better frame of mind as a result of that. So that's part of it. But the next thing, so the sort of next tier up from Constant Contact would be like Aweber or MailChimp. Those are good, and I used that for quite a while, Aweber. But what I have lately done is ConvertKit. And ConvertKit is very, very good with segmenting. And basically, you're able, based on a click that people have, to, they click on a certain link and then it will tag them. And so if you see, they clicked on the women entrepreneurs thing, well, then you have a pretty good sense, they're interested in women entrepreneur things. I'll send them more of that. Or the people who didn't click on it, maybe they're men, maybe I won't send them that. It allows you to make smarter decisions that enable you to not alienate your subscribers by sending them things that they don't care about. So I see that we are running low on time, so I will, at this point, I want to answer lots of your questions, so I will be around this afternoon through this evening, so please feel free to grab me for those of you where I didn't get to answer your questions. I would love to do that. Feel free also to email me through my website if there's particular things. If you want links to any of the resources that I talked about, like Sumo or Lead Pages or ConvertKit, etc., I have a whole list of productivity tools that I use. I'm happy to send it to you. If you send me an email and just ask for it, I will send that to you. And overall, what I just want to conclude with is that for all of you guys, we struggle with the same challenge, and I think that we're in a good position by dint of being here. More and more people, we're moving to the gig economy. Everybody wants to be a consultant, right? This is sexy stuff. People want the flexibility, they want the autonomy, they want the income earning potential, and But it is a winner-take-all situation. It's a winner-take-all economy. And in order to do it well, we have to raise our brand, we have to build our platform so that people are seeking us out rather than us being supplicants. So if we can do that successfully and we can be smart about creating multiple income streams, we can build the kind of careers and lives that we truly want. So thank you very much. Take care.
Dorie Clark.